This is our last event of the day, Elevating Women in Eye Care, with three incredibly inspiring and outstanding women that all have roles within industry. This was the reason that this kind of lecture came to be was because I was actually having a conversation with Dr. Mickles, and then I also had one with Dr. Johnson and Dr. Anderson, just telling them about how a lot of women didn't know that they could be involved in industry. And I have personally heard some women, students or young women in their careers say, oh, I could never work for so-and-so company because of XYZ. So I'm really looking forward to this presentation because you're going to learn from three outstanding optometrists who have made it into industry and kind of what the steps are and just kind of going over perceived barriers that are in the industry. And again, because there's three speakers, I'm just going to kind of give you the Cliff's Notes version. They're all outstanding. They all have a million accolades, but for time's sake, I'm just going to read a little bit about each one. Dr. Chandra Mickles currently serves as the North American Professional Education Lead for Johnson & Johnson Vision. She's a recognized leader in eye care and has had a career dedicated to professional education, patient care, research in contact lenses. Prior to joining Johnson & Johnson, Dr. Mickles had a successful career in academia and has been recognized by national optometric institutions and organizations. Dr. Kristin Anderson serves as the Director of Professional Education, U.S. Vision Care and Dry Eye at Alcon. In this role, she leads the development of resources, communication, strategies, and tactics for eye care providers. In 2021, she was a member of 2 teams receiving One Team Awards, as well as being part of the iLux team nominated for a Global Marketing Award. And Dr. Leah Johnson is the Director of Professional Affairs for Cooper Vision for Specialty Eye Care Americas. She's responsible for the development and implementation of clinical and educational programs supporting current and future eye care practitioners across the Americas and Asia Pacific. She's a graduate of the University of Houston College of Optometry, where she also completed a postdoctorate fellowship in cornea and contact lens. Dr. Mickles, Dr. Anderson, Dr. Johnson, welcome to Wu University. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Dr. Wu. Next. So a woman winning 23 Grand Slams, having a baby, and then coming right back for more, resilient. A woman becoming the first female dean of a public optometry school and being the past president of several national optometric associations, plus authoring over 200 publications while raising a family, extraordinary. And a woman going from hospital-based optometry to owning several private practices and now being a senior VP at a global company, trailblazing. Well, hello, everyone. And I just want to say to all of the resilient, trailblazing, extraordinary women and men, thanks for joining us this afternoon. And whatever industry that we are in, our mode of practice, similar to men, women have made an immeasurable impact on the world. But to do this, we've had to overcome some barriers. Next. So the three of us, each of us, are extremely proud that we have overcome the odds and are now industry leaders, having careers that we would have never imagined. So in the next 50 minutes, in a conversational format, we are going to discuss some of these common barriers that women face and how to overcome them. But before we dive into some of these barriers, Leah, can you share where we stand?
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Mickles, for sharing with us, what we can look up to and who, these first trailblazing women for optometry. it's nice to see, what we can aspire to be. And so when we look at this, where do women stand in just general industry? And I'm not going to repeat too many of the statistics. We've heard them a lot throughout today. But now we know that the statistics and numbers are there, right? The majority of CEOs are men, for Fortune 500 companies, corporate boards, they're predominantly men. We've learned from Dr. Sampalis on, gender inequalities of pay, and that women make about 80 cents for every dollar that a man makes. And so in general, women are getting better grades than men in subjects, in math and in science. They're graduating at higher rates from high school, attending colleges, going to medical school and law school. And we can see that women are breaking into new fields, but they're not the ones making these big decisions. And so, they're not the most encouraging facts, right? But that's where we want to take a look and say, let's get a lay of the land. Let's understand what our barriers are and how we can overcome them. And so that's what we're going to take a look at today.
Yeah, so Leah, I definitely want to say, as far as optometry, women have definitely left a mark. And you can definitely see that in academia. I remember graduating optometry school a little over 10 years ago and not seeing one female dean, but as you see today, approximately 23% of the deans are women. And we definitely made some great strides in the Optometric Association leadership. As we already heard from the great Dr. Dory Carlson and her being the first female president of the AOA, and now nearly 50% of the AOA Board of Trustees are women. But if you look at that first stat, right, 70%, almost 70% of the students are women. So there are these glass ceilings that remain unbroken. So what are these barriers that are holding us back or maybe delaying us a little bit in achieving our goals? Next slide. So what we want to do is find that out from you. So we're going to pull up this poll and ask you a question. What do you believe is or has been your biggest barrier to becoming a leader? So again, what do you believe is or has been your biggest barrier to becoming a leader? Is it gender bias? Is it limited connections? Is it lack of confidence or family responsibilities?
The poll is launched and we're just going to give it a few more seconds. The answers are coming in quickly.
Okay,
and as they do, Chandra, one of the things I'd just like to add is, you mentioned 70% of the graduating class. I remember when I was in optometry school, my class was the first class that was 50-50 male, female when we entered.
It's great.
And I won't say how long ago that was.
I know. Okay, as we see here, it seems like confidence, and I would probably agree. I would agree with that for myself. So we can take down that poll there. And Leah, let's talk about some of these barriers.
Yeah, so, when we're thinking about, first of all, we first wanted, I guess when we were discussing, what barriers do we have? And we're thinking, like gender pay or, pay inequality, but really that's a result of some of these barriers in itself. And so, when we look at this pay gap, and we've, seen in clear presentations that over increased experience, that pay gap increases. What are those reasons? And, of course, we've discussed many things. Women could be working less. They want more flexibility with their time, but the real reason is that changing a system is hard and the workplace isn't fair. And that's just kind of the situation that we're in. But we can say, let's take it all in. Let's identify tips and, using Dr. Anderson and Dr. Mickles' experience, how can we overcome those barriers, and what can we do, actionable items that we can take with us tomorrow in the workplace to overcome some of those obstacles. And so when we look at gender bias, that's, research tells us that, if he has a cranky behavior, right, that he's seen as a straight shooter, that he's seen as, an honest, good leadership man material, right? But if a woman is really, maybe has like a cranky demeanor, she's seen as hard to work with, like not leadership material. She's difficult to collaborate with. And then, right, for gender bias, if a woman is kind and trying to be supportive and helpful, she can be seen as like, soft, and that, that she's not good leadership material because she's too kind. But if a man is kind, right there, everyone's like, oh, he's such a sweetest, nicest manager, possible. And so just understanding these different types of research, Yale came out with a study that compared men resumes, right? So they had 2 resumes, and one resume, the sheet had more experience. And then for the other resume, the sheet had more education. And so they polled over 1,000 people, and they would say, okay, just by changing the names, so everything else was the same other than experience and education. And both times, for men and women who were saying who was the more favorable candidate, it happened to be the guy with the male's name on the resume. So when the male's name had more experience, experience was valued over education. And when the man's name was on the resume for more education, then it was saying, well, education is actually more valuable than experience. So this is just to show, we even within ourselves have some type of gender bias. And it's important to recognize these things and to say, okay, like, how can I be conscious of, gender bias in the workplace? And so with that, Chandra, I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts of gender bias in the workplace? Have you had any experiences or any examples to share?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I feel like in today's society, what is associated with being a leader are masculine traits, right? But if I think about what are great qualities of a leader, and that is effective communication, a great strategic thinker, having the ability to influence and inspire a team. Are those masculine traits? Are those only traits of men? I would say not. We as women have those skills as well, but I think it really comes in changing the mindset of society. It will take some time. But I think what we can do, as I was listening to you, Leah, describing the resumes, I think that blind screening would help with some of that, and making sure that those who are hiring those leadership positions have a diverse committee, to ensure that we're trying to eliminate or reduce some of those bias. And of course, implicit bias training should also help as well. I can go on and on about examples that I have experienced, and I'm sure that you can as well. But I think, really those are some ways that we can overcome that barrier.
Thank you. And Kristin, is this similar experience that you've had? Like, can you share with us on your experience?
Sure, and I agree with everything Chandra has said. The one thing I would add in, and it will come up in our continued discussion, certainly I think all of us who are on the panel today, from our previous speakers to the 3 of us, have multiple examples. I will say this, though, the more experience that I get, the more mature I get in my career, I'm glad to say that I'm seeing a trend and a definite change towards some of those qualities that Chandra mentioned. We've got a lot of work to do, clearly, but I do see that we are making progress. My favorite personal anecdote, though, about a gender bias is when I joined a practice with my husband, who's also an OD, and automatically, we were getting clinic assignments for a semester, and I picked mine up, And my background is residency trained in ocular disease and geriatrics. And I was assigned 10 and a half hours in the pediatric clinic. And when asked why, it was because I was a mom. I had kids. But I had no experience in pediatrics, really, other than what I had learned in optometry school. And I laughed because my husband, who was assigned to other clinics, actually had worked in a practice doing vision therapy. So again, personally, I laugh at some of these because it really reiterates your point, Chandra, that the qualities of the leader and the qualities that you look for any individual to fulfill a role really need to be based on what they bring to the table. And I think, again, that's really the conversation that we're trying to have today.
And I want to add something to this. I think it was an example by Dr. Carlson, and something that I've experienced just being in boardrooms or being in my former role in academia, where sometimes our great ideas aren't heard or they have to be confirmed by our male colleague. But I think keep pushing through, share your ideas, and make sure that those ideas are heard and that it's recognized that it's yours, and then execute. And I think by doing that, or execute well, I think senior leadership recognizes that and they will see you as a leader.
Yeah, and as Chandra had mentioned, speaking up when you have something to say. It can be hard to speak up with your opinion, but another way to also help support the other women in, your clinic or in your company is repeating what they have to say. And so when you repeat what your fellow colleague, if she had a really great idea and it kind of gets ignored by maybe senior leadership, if you can say, oh my gosh, that's a really great idea. I loved Chandra's idea. Did you hear that? And then Kristin says, yeah, like Leah, Chandra had a really great idea. And by building us up together, we're able to get those ideas across. And, and it starts with that one person speaking up, with what you can say. And it is a great idea. And, it kind of snowballs into amplifying that voice.
And sorry to interrupt, but this has been a question that has actually come up like every single hour of this event. And something that Dr. Carlson said was a lot of times men will speak over women, or, women's voices aren't heard unintentionally. It's not that they mean to do it, but do you guys have any advice on if you find yourself in that situation and you're like, okay, these men or this man keeps speaking over me, not that he's intentionally doing it, or maybe he is, but what are some of the things that we can do that are effective at still making sure that we are heard and our voices are being heard, basically?
So I can take, do you want to take a stab at it, Chandra? I have a preemptive answer, and then we can answer the question. And I think the first one is, don't wait to be asked at the table. If you've got something to say, get it out there as soon as you have that idea. But, tactfully, I've had to say, excuse me, can I finish my point? Or have somebody else on the side of the table, as Leah has said, kind of reinforce what I'm saying. So that would be my direct answer to that. But the first is really don't wait to be asked. Be a leader and be right there in the conversation as it's happening.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Kristin, based on what Stephanie was asking. If someone keeps speaking over me, I just pull them over to the side after the meeting and just let them know that they may not realize what they're doing, and to give all of us an opportunity to share our thoughts as well. And that's been effective. Also, at the end of the meeting, I may, and I've learned this from some mentors, I know we're going to discuss this later, I may shoot an email to the senior leadership and let them know, just as a wrap up, thank you for, letting me join this meeting. And this is the idea that I have. I hope that is something that we can implement in the business.
And something that I've found effective that I've heard it, I was reading a book and it was, it called it the Erin Brockovich kind of tip, but it's that sometimes, and this I actually realized, I'm like, oh, this is what I have done in, in our company, but it's advocating for another person, right? People are a lot more likely maybe to they're not listening to me because I'm not really doing anything, right? I'm just trying to advocate for someone else. But in overall, then they see like, oh, that, Kristin had a really good idea, or she was being talked over, but I'm not saying, hey, let me speak. I'm trying to say something. I'm saying, hey, everyone, let Kristin speak. She has something really good to say. And by standing together as women, in these situations, the next time I'm trying to say something, Kristin also is going to remember that and say also like, hey, Leah's trying to say something. And so those are tips that we've used in my workplace.
Yeah, and Leah, to add, it can be an advocate that's also a male as well,
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. And then you start building even within your own work culture, your advocates, where they see that you have something really valuable to contribute and they want to have that be heard.
Which kind of leads us to connections, right?
There you go. Yes. Having connections, right? A strong network is so essential in rising in any profession. When we look at, the executive leaders, they've built up, right, for years, their college networks, their professional networks, and networks for women are still evolving. But building these strong connections are a source, within your industry, within your practice, within your group, that sources of information, right? Advocacy, support. So you can't just rise and be a leader all on your own. You need to have the support of, other people there, also wanting you to be their leader, and giving professional advice. And something that I had also read is that, women are left out at work, right? They're left out of conversations. They can be left out of meetings, even after work, informal social events. And over time, this can have an effect and impact your rise to a leadership role, because you want to be in the room when things happen. You want to be in the room when that, new assignment is being discussed, or the new specialty clinic, or specialty day is being discussed. And so, Chandra, what are your thoughts on, trying to be in the room when this happens?
Well, I do want to say that some of this, it's not intentional by our male counterparts. If you think about it, for the most part, it's all the stats that we have shown, they make the vast majority of leadership. And then they have this network of friends. And then who do you think of for an opportunity? You think of your friends or those who are around you. So I think this naturally happens. But in order for us to change that, we have to create a seat at a table on our own. If we hear about a social event after, a long day at a conference or a long day at work, just go ahead and attend, because at those places are where I've garnered many opportunities. You might have been at a meeting, I know many I was at, and we were talking about a great research idea, and then that ended up being my project that ended up leading to several publications and helped me get promoted in academia. So being at the table is extremely important, and maybe it just won't naturally happen for us at this time, but we can make it happen.
Yeah. And I also think you have to let people know you want to have a voice at that table, right? It's making it very clear that you have a desire to be involved in conversations, in projects, in decision-making, and not, again, wait to be asked to do that, but get your intentions out there to the right people, whether it's a mentor, whether it's within your network, whether it's to your direct supervisor, or if you're in practice, to the owner of the practice, if you're an associate position. Just making your desires known that you are capable and want to do more and want to be involved goes a long way in getting, really a voice in some of those discussions.
Yep.
And something I would add is, when asked to do certain projects, sometimes I've thought that's not really my specialty, or like I'm not the best person for that. But taking on those things and, and saying, hey, I'm not afraid of taking on something additional or extra, gives you those additional connections that you didn't think you were going to make by working with that new group of, or subset of group of people. And that also helps expand your connections. So yeah, Kristin, you had talked about, what are tips on how to break through these barriers, making your own place or asking for that seat at the table. Do you have anything else that you want to share from that?
No, I think that's a really good one. And another one that I learned long ago, and it was very early in my career from a mentor who said, be the person that raises their hand for the job no one else wants to do. And that's kind of your point, Leah, where, you might not be sure you can do it, but raising your hand and volunteering to do something, it really stretches your ability. It demonstrates your commitment, and it shows that you have the leadership and the creativity to do a job that, again, we talked about earlier. You may not be the best person on paper to do it, but you certainly have the desire to have the right outcome. So again, a great tip is raise your hand and just volunteer for things that other people may not want to do.
Exactly. And Kristin, that of course takes confidence and leads us to our next barrier.
So yes, this is interesting one. I think it was it was for the poll questions, what is the biggest barrier in becoming a leader? The number one, over 30% chose confidence or lack of confidence. And so I know that we had Dr. Doshi mentioned some of these things as well. And so when we look at these different studies, and men and women have been presented with a task, and they were asked to pay themselves what they deserved. And what we found out is that men paid themselves more, and actually considered less tasks necessary for more pay. So it just also shows that women, we can be timid. I will definitely say the confidence in, saying what my value is worth, or, another thing that Dr. Doshi had mentioned is, another study they did is, when you're asked to nominate yourself for a promotion. And so this was with the Hewlett-Packard study, or that they had looked at. And men saw that, they nominated themselves for the promotion when they had 60% of the required skills, whereas women were waiting until they had 100%. And I think this also ties in with, our confidence in asking for a higher salary, because I want to make sure before I ask for a higher salary that I am doing, over 100 and, 10% of what I deserve to be paid for. And so all of this goes down to confidence, right? And so what are tips that we can take, and how do we build up our lack of confidence? For me, it's it's like, oh, okay, know your value, know your worth. How am I going to know my value? I don't know. You go to school, you get this education, you're seeing patients. It's like, how do I truly know what my value is, or what do I bring, for this, what do I bring for this practice, and being able to fit specialty contact lenses? Talk to other people, we're going to talk about this later, but, having mentors, or I would actually call up some the contact lens residents who had graduated before me, and I would ask them and say, can you give me some information? Information is power, and knowledge is power. And that then gives you the confidence. If you can say, hey, a specialty contact lens fitter makes X amount, and these different practices, that gives you the confidence of what your value and worth is when you're, interviewing or looking at a job proposition.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Leah. Knowledge is power. And if you have that knowledge, you'll have the confidence to ask for what you're worth. And I did that many times throughout my career thus far. You know, in academia, I definitely found out, because in private institutions, it's not public knowledge what the salary is, but I definitely took the time to reach out to both men and women in academia to find out the salary and the benefits that I should deserve for the position. And then similarly, when I went into my industry role, or prior to going to my industry role, I even was vulnerable and said, okay, this is what they're offering. Is this what I should be receiving? And what else? Is there bonuses? Is there anything else I need to know? So this is important. So when I stepped into the negotiation meeting, I had the confidence to say what I'm worth.
Mm-hmm. And I would add to that, outside of our worth as it relates to compensation, I think one of the things that Dr. Carlson talked about was the power of some self-assessments, whether it's a DISC profile or a Myers-Briggs or a Strength Finders. I laugh because on the table behind me, I have my Strength Finders. And it's one of those documents that I think is always great and exercises to go back. And when you're looking for areas to build confidence, you know, you build off your strengths, certainly, but it also helps you identify areas where if you need to have some personal development to help you overcome some areas, those tools are fantastic. And there are ways that you can kind of use those to understand your blind spots and also seek out mentorship or guidance to help you in those areas. So I just wanted to reinforce that because that was such a powerful piece in her presentation. I think it applies here as we think about how do we use our confidence, you know, in our own roles, but as we continue to evolve in our roles.
Yeah, and I think also, as you know, we had discussed earlier, just do it. You know, confident people act. If you volunteer, you know, volunteering for, you know, an extra, you know, project or something, you know, the more times you do it, the more confident you gain. And so just by putting yourself out there and maybe saying like, this isn't something I like, you know, this is a little bit outside of my comfort zone, but just doing it will help to build that confidence for your role. All right. So I thought that, you know, another perceived barrier we have, balancing work and just life. Dr. Selfassessments had shared that 40% of women feel that their biggest barrier in leadership is their work-family barrier. And so I thought that was interesting that was in one of her slides, the major barrier to achieving a leadership role. Kristin, I know you have a family. You've shared, you know, how you were asked to even be on the pediatric optometry schedule because you had a family. How do you feel that having a family has impacted your, you know, family responsibilities has impacted your work career?
Well, it definitely has had an impact, right? And at different times, it has had a greater impact. And I think Dr. Selfassessments said that as well as Dr. Carlson. And I'll go back to, again, something that one of my treasured mentors told me. They said, you know what, Kristin, you can have it all. You just may not be able to have it all at once. Meaning you've got to kind of pick and choose where you are. But I think this is a real struggle for a lot of us. And when we say family, it's not just children, right? It could be aging parents. It could be a spouse, significant other. It could be other responsibilities, but basically outside of work that are pulling at us. And, you know, at some point, you know, the advice that I give to those who are, you know, earlier in their career, they're kind of trying to juggle all of those balls or spinning those plates, trying to raise their families. You know, you've got to pick and choose your battles. And I share this story with young professionals all the time who have asked me, you know, how did I do it, raising 2 kids right in the middle of a career? And I said, you know what? I became the bottled water mom. And the bottled water mom is my metaphor for being able to participate in school activities in a meaningful way when physically I couldn't make a party that would happen at 10 a.m. because I didn't have flexibility over my schedule the way some of our colleagues in private practice may have. And so I knew they couldn't have a successful party without bottled water and napkins that were themed for that event. And so my garage was full of cases of bottled water and napkins for every occasion. So I felt like I could still contribute even if I weren't there at that given time. And I had to make peace with that. And honestly, there were times that I did not. So I think the struggle for work-life balance really happens with some of our colleagues, not just women, but certainly some of our young male counterparts who are really trying to figure out what is this right place for me. And I think the right place needs to be defined by the individual for what makes sense for them. And so, again, respecting our decisions, if you choose to work part-time because you're devoted to your family, that's a great decision for you. If you choose to work full-time and try to juggle the bottled water at the party, I think that's also a wonderful decision. And as women, I really think we need to do a better job of respecting each other's choices, because sometimes we're our own worst enemies here, trying to fit ourselves into a mold that isn't necessarily the same for everyone. So if anything comes out of the work-life balance piece for me, it's that, ladies, we must all be champions for one another if we're going to move the needle in any direction.
Yeah, and respecting those decisions, whether you have children or don't have children. I really like this quote that balance, and you were saying, how do you balance being a career mom or having a career, being a mom, being a great family member for your parents and for your siblings. And balance is not better time management, but better boundary management. Balance means making choices and enjoying those choices. And I think, as you mentioned, even for other women, respecting those choices that, each person has made for themselves.
I love that statement, Leah, as far as balance is not better time management, but better boundary management. And for a person that, may not have children yet, I do want to speak to what we call the office housework, right? Those things that we do or asked to do as women leaders that may not help us with career advancement, but we're being team players. And that might be organizing the holiday party, or, let's do the faculty big end of the year events, right? So we have to set those boundaries to make sure that we make the right choices in doing what we enjoy doing, and also what will help us advance our career.
Yeah. So Chandra, do you have any ways or tips on, how to balance some of this office housework that, isn't the glamour work? And of course, there's, there's grinding things that you have to do in every single job. But I think that studies have shown that men at a certain point of their career tend to get asked to do these things less, whereas women, even after 15 years, are still continue to ask to plan the parties or to schedule a meeting for for something, right? And coordinating everyone's schedules. So yeah, do you have any tips to share on how we can balance?
It's so important to understand the culture of the practice that you're in, and the university that you're in, or the company that you work for, and then ask for guidance from those who've been there for a while. And I've done that. And one person shared with me and said, you need to be firm and say, I'd love to help you out, but I don't have the bandwidth at this moment. Maybe next week I will focus on that. And so it's really what we have on the slide there, what is urgent versus non-urgent, or urgent versus what is important. And you have to really organize that to determine, is this something that you can really handle? And is it something that is really a part of your success path?
Yeah, and I think that, I found that in my working career, saying, well, I'm working on these priorities that are bringing, this to the table, and, maybe I need to, like, maybe we need to go and talk to my boss or my manager to see, you know, where this falls in line with my priorities. And it makes me look not as like the bad person who doesn't want to contribute, but it, you know, I'm already working on all of these things. And a tip is to, you know, if you have a good relationship with your boss, to have them kind of say, no, what you're working on is super important, or these are my priorities. So Leah can't be doing, you know, being pulled into some of these other projects that aren't as, aren't as contributing.
Yes. Yep. And I think, Leah, you said a really nice thing that talks about that strategy. It's also being honest with those that you're working with, right? If you need some help, asking the right people when you need help as well. And it's just a really open line of communication, in addition to setting those boundaries, but also letting them understand where you may be coming from or where you're sitting, because people don't understand what you have on your plate at any given time.
And I remember something that Dory said earlier. She said about delegating, and maybe someone else is better suited for that particular holiday party. Or
something my grandma also told me, she just said to not be great at making coffee, because then you won't get asked to make the coffee every morning. That was what my grandmother always gave me advice for every single new job I said. She was like, don't ever offer to make the coffee. And if you get asked to do it, just do a really bad job, and no one will ever stick you with those little chores again in the office.
never ask you to make my coffee, Leah. Forget it.
Well, now I have the little push the button. Now we have the self-made Keurig machines, right? So that you can just make your own coffee. But yeah, I think that, you know, balancing this work and life is really believing in yourself, and believing in yourself to have, you know, this kind of ties in, but to have that confidence to say, you know what, I just cannot commit to this right now because we have X, Y, and Z priorities, and, you know, we need to be better at setting those boundaries so that we can, you know, whatever project we are working on, give 100% to that project and do that project justice. So with that, we're going to go to opportunities and your toolkit on what you can use. Kristin, do you want to share on some of these toolkits?
Yep. Why don't we go ahead and just open them all up and we can have a discussion. You know, we talked about early on about identifying your career goals, and I'll be the first one to say that my career goals when I came out of optometry school were very, very different. If you see the journey that has taken me to where I've landed right now, but I wouldn't have changed a thing. But the important part is just really identifying where you see yourself in the next 12 months, 36 months, 5 years, and really kind of have a plan in place, always being open for opportunity. But without a plan, I think a lot of times we feel stuck or we feel stagnant in the practice in which we are in at that given time. So it's really always planning about who you want to be, what type of doctor you want to be, what type of career you want to have, and be open to the fact that that can change over time. So really, that would be number one, I think, for our toolkit. The second would be mentorship. And I think, Leah, Chandra, we have talked about this for a lot of time in preparation for the talk today. I think we all have mentors and we all have things to share on that. But Chandra, do you want to kind of kick off your thoughts about mentorship, and Leah and I can weigh in afterward?
For sure. I mean, mentorship, as we said, is critical for success. No one has made it alone, and no one will make it alone. And I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for the mentors whose brain I picked, who cheered me on, or who pointed me in the right direction. And because they've done that for me, I think it's so important for me to pay that forward. And I've done that many times. And I think as leaders, those leaders that are listening now, it's so important for us even to reach out to those that we see are perfect for a leadership role. Sometimes they may not have the confidence, as we talked about, to move forward on this path, but we should, say, hey, I think you'll be perfect for this residency. I think it'll be perfect for this industry role. So it really comes from us. And I think we also talked about the sponsorship. Sponsorship is key as well, not only the mentorship piece. There are a lot of opportunities that I've had from great women and men sponsors.
Yeah, I've kind of put in this, who is on your board of trustees? This was shared with me years ago, and I think it's a great kind of nugget to share out if you haven't heard it before. But it's really, you're the CEO of your journey, and you really have to put together your board of trustees and put people in the right place. It's not one person who's going to influence your journey and help bring you to the place where you define success. So it's really looking at those places where you need some guidance, you need some influence, you want to have a sounding board. And it's really kind of putting those people around the table with you, either individually or sometimes collectively. That can be a very powerful network.
Yeah, and my brother-in-law yesterday, told me that he was looking for a mentor, and he asked the question, like, how do you find a mentor, or how do you get someone to be a mentor? And I started to think about, the different mentors that I have in my life, and how did we form that connection or bond? And I'm curious, Chandra and Kristin, on, what your journey was. But for me, it was just, not always just informal. Like, yes, there's the informal, like I have sent letters saying like, oh, I'm looking for someone to, like, I'm looking for a mentor. I've, enjoyed, that's kind of like the cold calling mentorship of someone that you look up to. But also going back to just putting in extra work or volunteering for, if you have like someone that you're interested and you're like, oh, they would be a really great mentor, working with them and, or collaborating with them or offering to help. Like, there's always different educational opportunities within optometry, in all these different groups. And, like the clear reports or the papers, and saying like, hey, I want to contribute on my Saturdays and Sundays to writing, these educational pieces. And then from that, you start to slowly build up these connections, going back to connections with people, and, the opportunity to have these people mentor you.
Yes, definitely establishing those connections is really, really important. And definitely for the young ODs that are listening, there, all the associations, or most of them, have mentorship programs. But as you rise up, I really encourage you to reach out to those who inspire you, and they'll be more than willing to help you. I've never had someone say, well, Chandra, I don't have time for you, because they know how important this is.
I would agree with you. And what I have found, some of the most engaging individuals in helping me in my career were some of the people I thought were the busiest people in the world, but it was just a matter of starting a conversation, and it went from there. Very similar to Dory's conversation about sending the text to the author. You sometimes just have to ask. And I find sometimes the busiest people are the ones that are most willing to give of themselves.
Yep, paying it forward.
Mm-hmm. So we've all gone through leadership training. I would guess, Leah, Chandra, myself, we've taken a number of leadership training courses, and not to say anything about any specific course, but I think we put this in here as part of our toolkit for each and every person to identify that there are formal training programs that can help you build skills in certain areas. And certainly it's not one size fits all. So I would encourage you, and I think we all would, to reach out in whatever practice mode that you're in. If you're within a corporate structure, look to the corporate structure to what leadership opportunities they have for training. If you're in practice, there are a number of things that are available through associations and other organizations. But leadership training can be invaluable, and it's really just another place where you can meet other people to build your network. So I think we wanted to highlight the importance of that one. And then lastly, we wanted to talk. Yeah.
Here, Kristin, there are a lot of leadership training programs available. You just have to ask. So whatever mode of practice you're in, please ask that senior leadership of that mode of practice, whether it be academia, corporate, and so on, what resources are available, because they're there. Professional development is definitely there. You just may not know about it. And that
Absolutely.
tremendously helpful in my career for sure.
Yep.
Mhm.
And then the last one we put as an opportunity, certainly it's available to Leah, Chandra, and myself now being within an industry model, but it's not unique to industry, but affinity groups where are resources that have a specific focus where, again, you can help build your network, meet new people, and really kind of build up what you would consider that professional team where you get more insight, you get diverse points of view, and you help kind of build your own plan and your own path forward.
Yeah, affinity groups, I was not sure what this term initially meant. And so I actually Googled it. And then I saw that Wikipedia said they're employee resource groups. And then I thought, oh, ERGs. Okay, now I know what the ERGs are. Like, that's what it is, right? But and while I don't necessarily, we have them at our work, and they help bring employees together, right, on similar backgrounds, similar interests, and help make those connections. And so I think that you can also use these to expand your knowledge, your interest, learn from a mentor, if you're in an affinity or type of group, or you could even be the leader and start one at your own, at your practice or wherever you work. And they're going to help support your development as well.
Yeah. And these can be community-based as well. For those that are not working for a large organization, you can often find these within your community.
All right, so we're going to wrap it up with a summary from each of us. Chandra, I think let's have you start it off with overcoming perceived barriers.
Well, I think that we have come a long way, but we know that there are some glass ceilings that remain unbroken. So I do want to say that everyone that is listening, don't place a ceiling above yourself. Follow your passion, honor your calling, and success will follow. Kristin?
Yeah, I think my biggest take home for this is anyone can be a leader at any level. There's no definition, and many times some of the greatest leaders are the leaders without authority. It's the level of influence that you can provide and leadership within your practice setting, within your office setting, your community setting, that really sets you apart. And I do believe that it goes both ways. With experience becomes more formal leadership and leadership opportunities, but you can lead from day one in your practice. And I would encourage you to lead at that level and also bring others along with you. As we've talked about, bringing people along is the way that we're going to continue to have these conversations moving forward.
And then lastly, I want to share about ignoring imposter syndrome. Don't say no to an opportunity just because you don't feel qualified that you have the skills. Remember from all, what we've been learning today, that men will say yes when they're only 60% qualified, and women are waiting till that 100% qualification. And taking these opportunities and working hard, is going to impact your work community's perception and image and your exposure in the workforce, and that itself can turn into leadership. So with that, I just want to say I read this book. I felt it very helpful for me. It's called Machiavelli for Women: Defend Your Worth, Grow Your Ambition, and Win the Workplace. And there are so many actionable tips in here that I've been able to look at and say, how can I implement these in my workplace? Thank you. I love this quote also by Michelle Obama, that there is no limit to what we as women can accomplish. So with that, do we have any questions?
Yeah, outstanding. I love this comment from Dr. Simmons. She says, I've been practicing for 30 years, and this is the first time I've ever heard lectures focusing on issues that women ODs face. So thank you all for being such a part of this incredible event. And just, I think all of the lectures have been amazing and inspiring, and just was so grateful to learn from each and every one of you ladies.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
there
you.
is a question that has come in, and I guess I'm not sure if any of you would be able to comment on this, but how would you respond to managers or power position players whose role, which is incentive-based, is to keep OD salaries within a fixed level in spite of the number of years working and or increased work responsibilities that clearly deserve a raise or promotion, but are denied by said management? I have found out that by knowing what your worth is and talking with others is often discouraged and looked upon by management as a reason for dismissal or blackballing by the management.
Wait, where did the question go? I'm a visual person here.
Oh, sorry. So,
oh, no, I found the question in the Q&A box.
Yep. Okay, great. Yeah. So, I don't know, because I have never worked in a corporation like that where I guess people are, and I understand the question as far as if there's a certain person and their job is to keep OD salaries at a certain level or percentage, how do you still kind of, I guess, maybe overcome that and saying, hey, well, this is why I feel like I should be paid more, or this is what I do feel like I'm worth because of my experience or my dedication to the practice or going above and beyond, things of that nature.
Yeah. So Dr. Wu, I can answer really only to say I can't answer that question because really the frame of reference for the role I play in industry doesn't really fall into that bucket, nor am I representing any industry position on the panel. So I would probably defer that one.
All I would say here, not knowing the frame of reference as well, is that I think that most jobs have a salary range. And if you've hit that, uppermost part of the salary range, to go to your manager and to say, hey, I want to get to another level. What are actionable items that I can do to achieve, some other role? Can I take on, if this is an OD, like a practicing optometrist, are there additional administrative or other things, like just having that very clear communication with your manager and saying, I want to get here. How do I get here? What are my actionable items?
I really like that. And I think that an overall theme of today has been take action and really don't take a back seat. A lot of these presentations have really just kind of given women the power and to say something, speak up, create that seat at the table for yourself. Don't wait for somebody to create it for you. And just taking action, I think, has been a huge message throughout this event. So I love that, Leah. I think that's a great advice. Like you said, just ask, what else can I do? I did that in my first career where I was like, I want to make more money. What else do I need to do? Do I need to see more patients? Do I need to sell more glasses? What are the things that I can do? I don't want to just be given extra money just to have it. I want to know what I can do to earn it. So I don't think that you'll ever get there without actually asking for it. So I love that advice. Let's see if there's any other questions here. Is there a source, I guess, since you guys are all working in industry, is there a source that reports compensation for industry positions for ODs? It would be interesting to see if there's a difference between men versus women, large companies versus small companies. And I think, just from the limited amount that I know, I think that industry positions with optometry are pretty competitive, if I'm correct.
Yeah, for sure they are. They're very few, right? And unfortunately, I don't think there are any statistics on that other than, you know, you can search what the salary range is for a particular position. And then, like I said, what I did for myself, and just like what I did in academia, I reached out to people in those roles at my company and other companies just to make sure that I'm being paid fairly. Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, I don't know of any actual reports, but again, you know, making those connections to ask people, you know, to help you. People also like to help, even if they're not going to, you know, maybe exactly define what their salary is making. You know, they will also want to share information like, oh, there could be a bonus, or there could be additional opportunities that you should ask for.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
And time is valuable too. Keep that in mind. So it may not be more compensation, but you get more time for yourself. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Anderson, Dr. Mickles, Dr. Johnson,